And what you said that day changed your career kind of for the better. And Naval Ravikant has got a quote which is I love, which is pain equals wisdom. Like what were the one or two principles you took from that 20th of December 2012 that have then kind of played out in the rest of your life?
I think it just gives you perspective on things. So it means that the next time something not great happens, you've got perspective of like, it could be worse. It's the same with anything. Like, it's like, to be honest, we were talking before we started recording about having kids. Like, I've got, an 8-year-old, a 5-year-old, so I had kids at 27, so kind of relatively young for like, modern times in London. And once you've got kids, it's a bit cliche, but it's like, my eldest son basically nearly died when he was born, like wasn't breathing. And it was, supposed to be the best day of your life, but it's like the worst day because you're like, God, I honestly thought like your son's going to die. After that, you're like, well, if we're out of stock of a SKU because the factory's broken down or like, a retailer shouts at you, like nothing really is that important off the back of that. And I think that's one of the things we were talking about earlier around people. It's like, we've got to remember that, yes, we want people in the industry that are passionate and that give their all when they're at work, but we're not doctors, nurses, even teachers. Like, my mum worked in a hospital. I know loads of people that, literally like save lives or teach kids for a living. It's like, we're making drinks. Like we're not, it's not life or death. A lot of people think it is, but it's not life or death. And I think if you have like a healthy perspective, like, yes, you want to be ambitious, but actually you realize, what, it's just work at the end of the day.
You said we talked about work. What's been the worst day in your life?
Yeah, probably that I just mentioned. So yeah, when my eldest son was born.
What's your son's name?
Teddy. So yeah, he's 8 now, but like that was, obviously first kid, you don't really know what's happening. And like basically complications of birth, was born and which wasn't breathing. So they're supposed to, come into the world and cry straight away because they like immediately start crying. It was just dead silence. And it was like, oh God, this is terrible.
Wrong with him?
He just basically had an issue with his breathing when he was born and they like had to do CPR on him.
Me.
So like watching this tiny little baby get like, resuscitated. And he was fine. He was fine after sort of 20 seconds, 30 seconds, thank God. And very lucky, like he's totally fine. But that experience was definitely like the worst day of my personal life, which is ironic because it's supposed to be the best day, right? Obviously, eventually it was great and he's 8 now. And like, but it's, that's stress.
That is serious stress. What's one, this is a question I ask a lot of guests because I think it's just interesting. Like, what's one truth you really staunchly believe, but most people would disagree with you on?
Interesting. Okay, I don't know if it's the one, but definitely one that I think comes up quite a lot. I actually listened to one of your pods recently where it came up, and I have a bit of a different view to a lot of people on this, is around like working with and for friends. So I think a lot of people feel like you shouldn't have too many friends in your team, or you should have like more of a kind of professional. I think it was Ed from Candy Kittens that was talking about it with you, and he was talking about the whole Netflix thing around. It was Netflix that came up with it, but it was like a lot of people used to talk about work as family, but actually it should be more like a football team because it's like you don't fire your family. Basically, is the kind of common, and that's become quite a popular thing where it's like actually you should be much more kind of. You don't, they're not your family, but for me, I get that they're not your family, but I also don't buy that it's just like a football team. For me, it's more like they should be I want to work with friends. So like when I hire people, obviously they're not exclusively my friends originally, although everyone that we've got currently in Team Allura are basically people I already knew that I'm friends with, but they're people I want to be friends with or that I could see myself being friends with. And I think the football team analogy doesn't work because a football team plays for like 90 minutes and you can sub people on and off without having to go down to 10 men or 9 men. And so if a business is like a football team, then you would be able to sub people in and out immediately. And it's not like that. Like you spend 8 hours or more a day with people that you work with. And if you lose them, you have to replace them. And it often takes 6 months. By the time they've left, you've hired somebody, they've joined, they've worked their 3 months notice. So your gap of not having that person, the cost of not having that person is huge. So for me, it's like I want to work with friends. I want people that
Also with inherently in sport there's constant ego because you're trying to, as much as you're in the same team in say rugby or football. In rugby it's easy just because the numbers, but like there's 115 spot, right?
Yeah.
There's one sales director spot. Like there's maybe challenger brand's slightly different, but there's kind of ego involved.
Yeah.
I don't know where I sit on the spectrum. So if you've got family on the left, far left, if you've got football team, I went to do an interview with Athletic Brewing in
yeah.
And they were like, everyone was going around going, these are my teammates. They're like calling it teammates. I was like, fuck me.
Yeah.
Like they were like, we're teammates. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. So I think you've got, and it's almost, where do I sit in this? Because I think you're right. Like, if you're at Manulife, there was a golden period for about 2 years whilst I was there, where like I was working with my best friends.
Yeah.
Like, and it was sick.
Yeah.
Like, it was the time, like hands down, probably the best 2 years of my life. Like,
Yeah.
absolutely, like loved it. And everything was flying.
Yeah.
We then and then things changed slightly but everything ended up working out all right. But I kind of agree with you. I do agree with you on that. I also think another one on this is, how people say co-founders should be like different skill sets. I agree with that, but that point's there. I think what people don't do is go further upstream and say, yes, you have to be slightly different, but do you align on the same values? A bit like your sheet, your culture sheet. It's like people, I get messages a lot going, I need to find I don't know, I said northern accent, like I need to find a co-founder, right? But it's like you're looking for a co-founder. It's like, that is important, but actually you need someone who aligns with you on the values, on the vision. And then I'd rather have two people who are quite similar, but doing different things.
Yeah.
But I think that's where I kind of agree on that nuance. It's like, yes, have different skill sets, but do you agree on the same values? So how are you?
And that's where, just on that, so yeah, that's where I'm really lucky because my co-founder is like my oldest mate.
Yeah.
So we wouldn't have stayed friends if we didn't have like the same values. And we're actually so different, like I said, very different personalities.
Where's he from? Like,
so we went to school together, so both from Bedford, and then he's gone into he went into PR originally and then advertising and creative. So, and he's very much more, very, very different to me in a lot of ways, but also at core value level, the same. Yeah. But I think back to the point we were talking about, the other thing which is probably to answer your question about where I'm different here, pass your glass,
cheers,
where I'm different to a lot of others is I would actually say that whole, mindset of, okay, you shouldn't necessarily be like looking to work with your friends, or you shouldn't be too friendly with the people in your team. It should be, super ruthless, is based on a proviso that the most important thing is like growth at all costs. So business growth. So I would rather, I don't know about you, and this is maybe controversial, and this is where I think being open with people like investors is really important. I would rather have a business that was, if you just say revenue, a business that was 50 million revenue and worked with my friends versus 100 million revenue and worked with people I didn't like. Like ultimately, I would, even if I don't agree that working with people you aren't friends with, I don't agree that that's like needed to get the best out of a business. But the whole business first, like blah blah blah. That's assuming that your priority in life and in business is just like business success in inverted commas. And I would actually rather have a business that wasn't quite as big or successful in inverted commas from external metrics, but with a team that were just amazing, that everybody loved, that meant you went to work every day and you just had a great time.
Yeah.
And that's where like being a founder is quite liberating, because you're like, well, I'm in control of that. Yeah. Like if we want to grow this brand slightly slower, but have an amazing time while we do it and build a team of friends where everyone's loving it. And like you were saying, like your Manulife days, like my days were sort of at Bear, very similar. I'd rather that than basically just go after like, okay, we want to get 110% out of everyone all the time because we have to grow this fast. For me, growth is one goal, but it's not like the be all and end all. Like, the be all and end all is, am I happy? Am I enjoying it? Are my team happy? Are they enjoying it? And I actually think like I said earlier, if you focus on all those things, then the success follows because you've got an engaged team.
I think there's this fetishization and kind of masturbation over growth over the last, say, pre-COVID and the bubble of the kind of alt meats and the drying up of cash. I think kind of in the zeitgeist of challenger brands, there was this kind of like, you can build a brand in 5 years, flip it and sell it.
Yeah.
I've now realised that it's become a stark reality, and people have now, this is from people I've spoken to and just generally kind of talking about it, people are now realising, okay, well, that doesn't just happen. You don't build it in 5 years. I've got an analogy of like, you know, it happens in tech where you've got these fucking unicorns, your Airbnbs, your Instagrams, like food and drink is not tech.
Yeah.
It's, you got to be a donkey, right? And the reason being is, you know, as much as you can get like my mum, it take my mum, providing she's not had a drink, which she often has, bless her, and has got her sunglasses on, nothing wrong with that. And to get onto, you know, to become a user of PayPal would probably take her 10 minutes. Providing she's got an iPad fired up. For her to go and buy a bottle of this, Allura, it's the cycle's much longer. So comparing tech to food is like apples and lemons.
Also, though, even in tech, and you hear, I mean, I know you listen to a lot of the same podcasts and stuff as I do. Even if you do make a massive success of it and sell it and make a load of money in 5 years, most people that you listen to say that the minute they sell it, it's like the worst day of their life.
Yes.
Because what do you do then? So like, if we make Allura like $1 billion brand and sell in 5, like, well, be 40. What do you do with the rest of your life? Like, okay, yeah, it's fun for a while and you make a load of money potentially. But I would much rather just have a great time whilst doing the stuff you enjoy, and hopefully then you have a really successful business. Because obviously you've got to balance it, right? You've got investors, you want to make your investors a return, but I think you're completely right. I think the growth obsession is a bit crazy. And you see it now, only over the last couple of years. I don't know if you've noticed this. More and more on LinkedIn, I saw another one earlier today. People are shouting about raising money as if it's like a success. So it's like, we've just completed a 2 million funding round, and it's like this huge celebration, and everyone comments like, well done, well done. And it's like, since when did raising money become a success? Like, obviously, it's a hard job as a founder, and it is important. And you should celebrate that, in my opinion, internally. But it's almost like that's the, like, we've nailed it because we've raised like 5 million. The hard job is after you've raised the 5 million, because I
always say there's this LinkedIn Soho House bubble, right? Which, and my mate's got membership at Soho House. I go and I have a good time in there. But it's like you see this microcosm echo chamber versus the reality. And I think to your point about going up to Yorkshire, you see the reality of the rest of the country, you see the reality of the world.
Yeah.
And it's like, raising your 2 million quid, Series A, B, C, Z, whatever you want to call it, is great for telling your mates at Soho House in a fedora hat, and you're sat there, but it's like, it's still not reality. And back to our point is, I think what you said there about kind of, we're going right back to the beginning of our point of like teammates on this side on the right is facilitating that fast growth narrative. Family is probably like the very slow way. So, which is interesting because the manufacturers who do You Candy Kittens are a German family, and they build for longevity. And I think if we look at this spectrum, what you're saying is it's not as extreme as family, where it's like, okay, it doesn't matter if the lazy crackhead cousin doesn't rock up for work. We're friends, and I think friends is a really nice balance between that, because friends care for each other, have the same values, and want to work. And I think it's getting interesting as this bubble kind of changes with the people realizing that you're not gonna flip it in 5 years, because I think all those brands that started, so you had a few inflection points. I wrote about in my newsletter last week. You kind of had your Tyrrell's, Innocent, and Goo, in like early 2000s, who did flip pretty quickly. Then you had like the next wave, which was kind of 2011, which was Pip and Nut, Jimmy's Iced Coffee. I know he's just sold, but that's taken them 10 to 12 years. Yeah. And I think now the brands that kind of start at the same time as Manly Life is, that Moju, they've been at it for like 9 years. It takes much, much longer. And when you have that long time frame I think it allows you to enjoy the day to day more.
Yeah.
What with your friends, like how do you the other side of this conversation, right, is like how do you remain friends and not have bust ups? Because I know for a fact if I went into business with, I went travelling with my best mate, and at one point I wanted to strangle him and he probably wanted to strangle me. Do you know what I mean? So how do you navigate that?
Yeah, and I think you're right. Like, there's probably some friends I wouldn't go into business with.
Interesting. Yeah.
So I think you need to choose the right. Like, I think if you're close enough. So like I said, me and Jamie, kind of oldest mates. Like I said, godfather to my oldest kid. Like one of the ushers at my wedding. So the bond there, it is more like brothers. Like it's more like I'm closer to my 3 or 4 best mates than most of my family. And he's one of those. So it's like, actually, even if you have a bust, like, you know, it's like with your brother or your family or whatever, you can have a bust up and most people are then still fine. So I think you've got to choose the right friend to go into business with. And then I think with friends that you manage, you know, like if you hire people like we have and I have in the past who either are friends when you hire them or become good friends when you work with them or manage them, it's just about being like honest and transparent. And so it's like, yeah, you have to sometimes have difficult conversations if you manage somebody who is a friend but they're not necessarily performing. Like, you've got to just have an honest conversation. But that's where people, I think, just, you know, appreciate openness and honesty. And it's like almost easier then to manage them because there's like the level of, they don't want to let you down. Like, do you know what I mean? It's like, if you're having a conversation with your manager and you're actually friends with your manager, it's probably more of an incentive for you to like sort it out if there's a problem than there is if you like hate your manager, you know, the one you were talking about in the past, one of your previous companies. If you're like behind the door, closed doors, you're like, this guy's a dickhead. Like, the incentive to listen to their constructive feedback is probably a lot lower. Whereas if it's one of your like friends telling you, look, that's why I've always hired either friends or people that I think, you know, I could be friends with that share the same values.